On Tuesday, I won $845,000 in a lottery. By dinner time, my son had locked the front door, hid my phone, and said, "The sooner we transfer it, the safer. Just transfer it to me tonight." The kettle was whistling, the receipt for the loan was under a magnet on the refrigerator, and my child was talking to me as if I were a walking sack of money, an old woman cheated out of her winnings, my own son. "I'm not helpless," I said. "It's not helplessness," Daniel replied, calmly and matter-of-factly. "It's responsibility. You don't need that kind of money. I can handle it. We'll give you pocket money so nothing gets mixed up." He placed a notarized transfer form next to my cup, neatly trimmed at the corners, as if neatness could make stealing polite. I reached for the paper and he covered my hand, not hard but firm, the way I remembered from when he was 16, making mistakes bigger than his. "Don't make it harder," he said. "There are people who can make you do the right thing." "People?" I looked at his wedding ring, at the faint pink streak where he'd chewed his cuticle when he lied. "What people, Daniel?" "Your bank. Your doctor. Maple Ridge might file a health report if you act irrationally. We can make this easier." His gaze darted down the hallway, where my purse sat on a chair. He was already standing between me and my purse, between me and the door. The kettle screeched, I turned it off, and the house went tense. How could my own son look at me and see a safe being cracked and not the woman who taught him to count change at this very desk? He thought age had turned my spine to dust. He thought fear would shake my pen. I pushed the paper away. "You're right about one thing," I said. "There is a right way to do it." He smiled confidently. They always smile until they aren't. He didn't notice the red light of the camera on the bookshelf blinking, the envelope already mailed that afternoon, or the way I moved my purse to a chair where his knees would catch if he stood up too quickly. Let him think I'm soft. Let him think I'm slow. He mistook softness for surrender. I spent the winter learning my rights and memorizing quiet footsteps. "Go to sleep," he said, unlocking the door with my key and pocketing it as a souvenir. "I'll be back in the morning. We'll go to the bank together." At the end, his tone softened, almost tender, like the apology he would make later. He left with my key, my silence, and my newfound faith. When the noise of his car faded, I turned the deadbolt from the inside. My phone was in the bread bin. I'd put it there myself when he arrived, an old habit from the years when bad news was delivered over dinner. I looked at the screen. The camera app had recorded everything, from the moment he placed the form on my desk to the moment he took my key. The audio was clear. The red light had done its job. I called Ruth, my neighbor, who answered on the first ring. "Are you okay?" she asked. We had a code. 1 ring meant a routine call, 2, an emergency. Tonight I pressed call, hang up, call back. "It's okay," I said. "But I need you to leave the porch light on. And if you see Daniel's truck coming in late, don't open the door. Just watch." "You sure you don't want me to call my nephew?" Ruth asked. Her nephew was a detective who visited her on Sundays with a bag of oranges. "Not yet," I said. "Tomorrow will be noisy enough." I made tea and sat in the quiet, the claim receipt still under my magnet. I thought of the lottery booth at the pharmacy, the clerk with chipped blue nails, how ordinary everything had been when the machine printed numbers that matched. I had laughed. I had walked out under the same tired strip mall lights, unaware of how quickly joy draws a crowd of hands. While the water cooled, I opened the mail drawer and took out a copy of the letter I'd sent at noon, as soon as the lottery office confirmed verification. The letter appointed a trustee, Harborstone Bank, to oversee an irrevocable trust in my name, with clear instructions about distributions, beneficiaries, and one clause I had added after a long talk with a woman named Ms. Alvarez from the legal clinic: no disbursements to any individual acting under duress, coercion, or guardianship interventions initiated within 90 days of the claim. I had set aside a portion for my granddaughter's education, a portion for the church pantry and the little library that always ran out of large print mysteries, and a portion for my own roof, which leaked in March in a way that would not wait. Not everything had been notarized. The trust arrangement would be executed at the bank the next afternoon with witnesses. But Ms. Alvarez had already seen my drafts and emailed me a list of what to say if anybody tried to move faster than the law. I had printed her email and folded it into my cardigan pocket like a prayer. I slept in my clothes. I put a second set of keys, my real ones, in my shoe where nobody looks unless they mean to carry you. Before dawn, I walked the edge of my yard, watering in the dim light, so that when Ruth's nephew rolled by on his way to work, he saw my porch light and my hose and understood the message Ruth had asked him to understand. At 9, Daniel called. "I'm out front," he said. "Ready?" "Give me a minute," I said. "The bank opens at 10. "Some banks open at 9, he replied. "I checked." "Harborstone opens at 10, I said, and let the silence unnerve him. He waited in his truck while I dressed in my navy slacks and the soft sweater my sister used to call my courthouse cardigan. I brushed my hair back, tied my shoes, and slipped the camera card into my wallet. When I stepped outside, Ruth was sweeping her porch as if spontaneous sweeping were a hobby. She raised her hand. I raised mine. Daniel unlocked the passenger side from the inside. He'd cleaned the fast food bags from the floor. He had shaved. He was the best version of himself when he wanted something. As he pulled away, I saw his jaw work and relax, work and relax. "You're doing the right thing," he said by way of greeting. "I'm doing a thing," I said. At Harborstone, the assistant manager, a woman named Claire with silver thread in her bun, greeted me by name. I had banked there for 36 years. She had watched my children bring me crayon drawings to sign like checks. She'd mailed a condolence card when my husband passed. She knew my voice. "Mrs. Garrison," she said. "We have a room ready." Daniel stepped forward with a professional smile. "I'm her son," he said, hovering at my shoulder. "I'll be managing her accounts." Claire's eyes did not leave mine. "Of course," she said to me. "Shall we?" We sat in a small glass room that always smelled faintly of toner. A notary named Sam arrived with a stamp in his pocket. Claire placed a folder on the table with tabs like little flags. "Here is the trust agreement exactly as you emailed last night," she said. "As we discussed on the phone, we'll execute it today and then handle your lottery deposit when it clears." Daniel's smile faltered. "Sorry, what trust agreement?" "The one my mother sent us," Claire said pleasantly. She slid a page toward me, then registered, as only an experienced banker can, every twitch in my son's face. "All disbursements per instruction of the trustee. Harborstone will manage the funds." "That's unnecessary," Daniel said. "She can't keep track of all this." "It's too complicated." "I can read," I said. "And I can sign." I paused. "And I can choose." He leaned back and spread his hands. "Mom, you said you wanted someone you trust to help." "I'm someone you trust. I trust a bank to count," I said. "I trust a lawyer to read. I trust you to be my son." Claire's gaze flicked between us. "Shall I get Miss Alvarez on the line?" she asked. Daniel laughed, a quick, incredulous sound. "You brought a lawyer into this?" "She brought herself," I said, and allowed myself the smallest smile. "Public service can be very persistent." He stood too quickly, and his knee caught the edge of the table the way I had planned last night with the purse on the chair. Paper skidded, but Sam put a calm palm on the stack and steadied everything. Daniel exhaled through his nose, angry at furniture, at gravity, at everything that did not comply. Claire cleared her throat. "Mr. Garrison, if you are to be present while your mother executes documents, I'll need to note your presence for our records. Could I see your ID?" He patted his pockets, theatrically surprised to find his wallet missing. Of course it was. I pointed at his breast pocket. He flushed, then produced it. Claire glanced and wrote his name down, and I watched the line of his shoulders shift when he realized we were not going to be hurried. The room had more witnesses than he expected and fewer doors. We signed. The notary stamped. Claire shook my hand with the relief of a person who has seen 100 versions of this story and prefers the ones that end right. Before we left, I handed her the camera card. "If anything happens," I said, "the file is labeled Tuesday. There is more at home." "We'll keep this on file," she said, And Mrs. Garrison, if anyone tries to change or access your accounts without you, call me first. Even if it's family, especially if it's family. In the car, Daniel's jaw worked again. That was unnecessary, he said. You embarrassed me. Better embarrassment than prison, I said mildly. He laughed again, this time without humor. Prison? Don't be dramatic. I watched the town pass through the windshield. The barber who still set his combs in blue liquid, the church sign that always had a pun about psalms, the park bench where my husband and I had celebrated paying off our mortgage with a cheap sandwich and a better apple. The world was quiet and ordinary after a storm. At home, he followed me inside. What now? He asked. You have the trust? Fine. But that doesn't solve the problem. What problem? I asked. That you don't know what you're doing, he said. You'll be prey. People will come around. Contractors, salesmen, investment advisors. You'll give it all away in a year. I set my purse down slowly. Daniel, I said, why don't you tell me the real reason you need my money? He blinked. You think I don't hear things? I continued. You think the same town that brought me casseroles when your father died doesn't gossip when your truck disappears from your driveway 3 nights a week? You think I don't know what a balloon payment is? He opened his mouth, shut it, opened it again. It was a good deal, he said, the petulance of a boy who insists he can swim because he hasn't drowned yet. How much? I asked. It's my business, he snapped, and then, seeing my face, grudged, 240. Maybe 260 if the interest. And what happens if you don't pay? Don't worry about it, he said quickly. I am worried, I said. I'm worried you'll offer your mother as collateral? He turned away as if the air had teeth. The house seemed smaller around his shoulders, the ceiling lower, the doorways narrower. He had been a gentle baby. He had been a gentle boy until the world taught him urgent arithmetic. I felt grief like a second pulse. I talked to your father about money every week of our marriage, Hassan, I said softly. I'm not allergic to numbers. I'm allergic to secrets. He drew a breath as if to argue, but his phone buzzed on the counter with a name he didn't want me to see. He flipped it over. Who is calling you for $240,000? I asked. He said nothing. Fine, I said. Then we will do this the right way. You will leave my house. I will put a chain on the door, and tomorrow you will come back, unarmed with papers you printed from the internet, and you will tell me the truth. If it is something that requires a lawyer, I will help you find one. If it is something that requires the police, I will dial myself. His mouth twisted. You call the police on your own son? If my son is a stranger at my door, yes, I said. I will call them on the stranger and leave the door open for the boy I raised. He left with a slam that made my dishes shiver. I slid the chain on and let my hands shake for a minute. Then I did what women do when the storm passes. I swept. I put the kettle on again. I called Ruth. Do I call my nephew now? She asked. Not yet, I said. I need to set the table first. That night, someone moved my garbage can from the curb to the middle of the yard. Someone tore the screen on the side window. Someone jiggled my back doorknob for a long time at 3 a.m. I lay awake and watched the red light on the camera blink, steady as a heartbeat. At dawn, I changed the locks. At 10, I went to the clinic. My doctor, a woman 15 years younger than me with eyes that always looked like she'd been crying on behalf of her patients, ran me through the standard cognitive tests and additional ones I requested. I named animals, counted backward by sevens, copied a cube, remembered a list of words after a short story, and spelled world in reverse letters. I passed. She wrote a letter on her letterhead that used phrases like no evidence of diminished capacity and oriented to person, place, and time. I put that letter in my courthouse cardigan next to Ms. Alvarez's email. At noon, I met with Ms. Alvarez herself in a borrowed office above the hardware store. She wore flats and fierce lipstick and listened without interrupting while I described the kitchen, the kettle, the form, the threat. Do you want a restraining order? She asked. Not yet, I said. If I can avoid writing my son's name on a paper like that, I will. But I won't stand unarmed, then we document. We notify the bank. We alert Adult Protective Services on your terms, not theirs. We put a fraud alert on your credit. We lock down your phone account. We put your lottery funds in the trust when they clear. And we plan for the other side to get worse before they get better. She leaned forward. They always get worse before they get better. I know, I said. I have raised toddlers, teenagers, and a garden through drought. She smiled. Do you have someone you trust absolutely? Ruth, I said without hesitation. Then we let Ruth be your shadow witness. She slid a paper across the desk. And if he tries to file a guardianship petition, we meet him in court with every letter you collected and a flash drive of your Tuesday. We did not shake hands. We walked to the window and looked down at the street where the hardware man was arranging rakes like soldiers. The town was itself. My fear was the new thing. At 4, Daniel texted me. Dinner? We can talk, here at 6, I replied. Ruth will join us. Why, he wrote. So I can keep my hands free for soup, I typed, and left it at that. He arrived at 5:45 with a store-bought cheesecake and a man I did not know. The man wore a blazer the color of rain and held a leather folder. This is Victor, Daniel said. He's a financial advisor. Ruth was already at my table pouring tea. And I'm Ruth, she said brightly. I'm a person who reads small print. Victor held out his card. I took it and placed it on the table without looking. Daniel set the cheesecake down like evidence. We should make a joint account, Daniel began. Victor can set up protections. It will make everything easier for whom? I asked. For everyone, Victor said smoothly. Joint oversight prevents missteps. Joint oversight, Ruth repeated thoughtfully. Is that what they call it now? I folded my hands. I'm not opening a joint account. It's standard, Victor said. It's standard, I said. When 2 people own something together, this money is mine. Victor smiled. It's about safety. I have safety, I said. It is called a trustee. Daniel's face reddened a shade I recognized from his Little League years. Mom? Daniel, I said quietly. Why didn't you tell Victor that Harborstone already executed the trust? Victor's smile faltered. He looked at Daniel, who swallowed. We could still advise, Victor said. Investments, asset allocation. The trustee handles that, I said. If you brought a plan, you brought it to the wrong house. And if you brought pressure, you brought it to the wrong woman. The air changed in the room like the moment a storm decides whether to pass or break. Daniel's fists opened and closed. Tell me who you owe, I said. Victor lifted a shoulder. We don't need to get into that, he said. I am not speaking to you, I said without raising my voice. I looked at my son until he had to look back. Who? He looked at his hands and said a name I had heard once in a conversation he told me to forget. The room, which had been small, drew smaller still. I understood the kind of man who lent Daniel that money. I understood the timeline. I understood why my garbage can had traveled at night. You think this will help? I asked Victor. If you bully a woman into a signature and her son vanishes into a debt he can't repay, you think a man like that stops at numbers? Victor cleared his throat. We're not bullying, he said. We're advising. You're advising, Ruth said, that she hand over a bank account in a house with new locks, a neighbor with a nephew at the precinct, a camera, a lawyer, a doctor's letter, and a trustee. That's an odd plan. You called the police? Daniel demanded, wounded. I called a neighbor, I said. The police is what happens to strangers at my door. He stood and paced, the same restless circuit he traced at 14 when grounded. He touched the back of the chair where his father used to sit and snapped his hand back as if burned. Sit, I said. And he did, because the body remembers the woman who taught it how. We can help with the debt, I said, but on terms that keep you alive and me whole. You will bring me every paper you have. You will tell me every lie you told to get the money. You will let Miss Alvarez read you the consequences, and if the lender threatens you, we will go to the police and say the words you don't want in your mouth. He bristled. I'm not a child. Then don't make me treat you like one, I said. Victor snapped his folder closed. I'll come back when you're in a more receptive mood, he said to Daniel. You won't come back at all, Ruth said, standing with him. Because if you do, you'll be leaving with a business card from a detective instead of a woman who bakes muffins. Victor adjusted his blazer and left. Daniel slumped in his chair. He's just a middleman, he muttered, as if that excused the mediation of harm. He's a door, I said. You decide whether to walk through him. He put his head in his hands. 268, he said into his palms. I thought I could flip a property. I thought I could. He gestured, helpless. I thought a lot of things. What's your timeline? I asked. 60 days, he said. And the penalty started last week. We ate soup in a silence that tasted like metal. After dinner, he gathered the bowls and took them to the sink, without my asking, the way he used to when apologies were still about broken vases and not broken promises. At the door, he paused. I don't want your money, he said. You want breathing room, I said. You want the feeling of a mother's lap without the weight of a mother's rules? He looked like a boy again for half a heartbeat. Then he left. The next day, Miss Alvarez met us at the station. Daniel's shoulders were set with shame. He had shaved again. His good shirt was ironed. The officer who took our statement had gray hair and a plain way of speaking. He listened without judgment while Ms. Alvarez outlined the phone calls, the names, the interest rate that looked like a joke if you didn't know jokes, sometimes drew blood. We'll open a case, he said. We'll put a patrol on your street for a while. And Mrs. Garrison, if anyone comes to your door who isn't a neighbor or a uniform, you don't open it. I have an old baseball bat behind the umbrella stand, I said. Keep the bat, he said. Keep the door closed. We drove to Harborstone to meet with Claire about a temporary account for Daniel with strict guardrails. Funds only to pay off the predatory loan, with the bank cutting the check directly, nothing that could be siphoned. Claire's face was cautious and kind. We can structure something through the trust, she said, with stringent conditions. Repayment to your trust over time, no cash transfers. And we involve Ms. Alvarez as counsel, so nobody stands alone in the room. It feels like punishment, Daniel said. It's protection, Claire said. It can be both, I added. As we signed, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number, a photo of my mailbox dented, a caption that said, "Nice place. Would be a shame." The officer assigned to our case came within the hour and stood on my porch with his notepad. This is meant to frighten you, he said. Don't let it make you foolish. I intend to let it make me careful, I said. 2 nights later, someone followed Daniel from the grocery store to his street. He called me from his car with his voice tight, like any sudden stillness might crack him. I'm not going home, he said. Go to Ruth's, I said. Her porch light is on. Ruth put him on her couch with a crocheted blanket and poured him tea with too much honey while I called the officer who had told me to keep the door closed. He sent a car to circle Ruth's block. I walked over with a pie I had made for no reason and sat beside my son while he stared at nothing. They're going to hurt me, he said. Then we will be louder, I said. Men like that hide in the cracks between fear and shame. We pour light in. He laughed a broken laugh. Since when did you become a general? Since the day my boy became a battlefield, I said. The next morning, the officer called. We picked up a man near your street at 3 a.m. with a screwdriver and bad timing, he said. He had a card in his pocket with the same number that texted you. He's not talking, but silence is useful too. When the lottery funds cleared, Harborstone deposited them into the trust. Claire brought me a sheet with numbers that made me lightheaded if I looked too long, so I looked only long enough to understand. We sent the bank's cashier check directly to the lender's office with a letter from Ms. Alvarez attached, full of words that bite. We filed a report with the state about predatory lending practices. We filed another about attempted financial exploitation of an elder, the phrase that hurt and helped at once. The man in the rain blazer, Victor, called from a different number to apologize for miscommunication. I let his call go to voicemail and kept the message. Ms. Alvarez layered it on top of everything else in a folder she labeled with a year, not a name. But because ugly things don't end when you send a check, there was more. 3 weeks after we paid the debt, a petition arrived in the mail, filed by a person I had thought was a distant cousin of Victoria's, but turned out to be closer to the lender than to any family. An interested party, petitioning for emergency guardianship on the grounds that I was spending prodigiously and irrationally, likely victim of sudden windfall mania. Attached was a sworn statement by a notary I had never met, asserting I had been confused about the trust at Harborstone and needed supervision. I sat at my table and read my own life written as if I were a storm drain. I called Miss Alvarez. She answered on the first ring. "I told you," she said softly. "They get worse." "What do we do?" I asked. "We teach the court who you are," she said. "We teach them quickly." She called Claire. Claire sent an affidavit with every page number and signature from the trust execution. She called my doctor. The doctor sent her letter. Ruth wrote a statement that made me cry, then made me stand up taller. The officer sent the case notes with the photo of my dented mailbox and the man with the screwdriver. Ms. Alvarez compiled it all with little flags of color until the stack looked like a city skyline. We walked into court together, and I realized my cardigan was the same navy as the judge's robe. It felt like a blessing. The judge was a woman with hair the color of rain on concrete, and eyes that did not owe anyone anything. She listened, she read. When the notary who had sworn I was confused failed to appear, the judge sent a deputy to find out if he had a habit of notarizing without a person in front of him. He did. The judge frowned. Then she spoke, and her voice was the best music I had heard since Tuesday. Petition denied. Costs to the petitioner. Referral to the district attorney for fraud. Afterward, in the hallway that smells like a mixture of old paper and old coffee, Daniel turned to me with two expressions fighting on his face, shame and relief, and whispered, "I'm sorry." The words sounded small in a big building, but they were the right shape. "I know," I said. "I believe you. But I am not your shield. I am your mother." He nodded. "I don't know what that means." "It means I will not stand between you and the consequences," I said. "I will stand beside you while you face them." We walked home in a cold, bright light that made everything look honest. Ruth met us at my gate with a plate of muffins. I took one and held it like a trophy. Daniel asked if he could fix my loose fence board. He did. He stayed for dinner without bringing anyone in a rain blazer. When the first distribution from the trust arrived for my roof repair, I climbed the ladder with the contractor to look at the shingles. He tried to talk me down, gently, the way men do when they assume they are protecting you from gravity, but I climbed anyway. The view from up there made the town look smaller and kinder. I pointed. "That flashing is your problem," I said. He laughed. "You don't need me, do you?" "I need you to carry the heavy things," I said, "and to show up when you say you will." "Ma'am," he said, "I can do that." Daniel found a second job he did not love, but did well. He went to meetings where men sat in a circle and said their names and their mistakes. He gave me receipts. He signed a note to the trust, agreeing to repay what had been paid for him at a rate that would not drown him. When he was late with one payment, I did not scold. I looked at the calendar with him, and we adjusted without lying. He learned that breath is a better drug than urgency. We fell into a truce that resembled grace more days than not. One Sunday, Victoria came by with my granddaughter and a pie. She had a smile on that held too long. She asked questions that tasted like metal, sweet on the surface, sharp underneath. "Are you sure it's safe to keep that much money in a bank?" she asked. "Don't you want to diversify with family?" "I diversified with a trustee," I said. "And with a pantry that feeds 50 families on Fridays. It's good to spread things around." She opened her mouth, closed it, and leaned down to tie my granddaughter's shoelace with a flourish that was almost maternal. She did not bring up Maple Ridge or trackers for my shoe. I did not bring up notaries who lie. We ate pie because I am not a saint, and because revenge held in the hand is less toxic than revenge held in the heart. I allowed myself one gesture. I invited Daniel and Victoria to dinner on the night the lottery office sent the last formal letter confirming the claim was closed and the funds secured in the trust. I set the table with the good plates. I lit the candles. Ruth joined us with a casserole that could feed an army. After we ate, I brought out an envelope. Daniel's shoulders tensed. He had learned to expect paper from me like a storm cloud. "It's nothing for you to sign," I said. "It's something for you to read." He opened it. Inside was a photocopy of the trust clause he had not read and of the repayment schedule he had. Tucked between them was a letter to my granddaughter, sealed, to be opened on her 18th birthday. On the outside, in my neat hand, I had written, "For the woman you will be." "What is it?" Daniel asked. "A story," I said. "About Tuesday. About kitchens and kettles. About what we do when money shows us who we are and gives us a chance to choose again." He stared at the envelope as if it might explode. Are you cutting me out?" "No," I said. "I am cutting out your entitlement. You may live without it, you may thrive without it, but you will not inherit it." He swallowed. "And if I try to earn my way back in?" "You already are," I said. "Not to my money. To my table." He blinked hard. He nodded. He put the envelope down as if it were a baby sleeping. Later, when the dishes were done and Ruth had taken her casserole dish home and the house was quiet, I sat at the table and looked at my hands. They were the same hands that had held my husband's on a park bench when the mortgage was paid. They were the same hands that had bandaged knees, braided hair, signed permission slips, and clapped at graduations. They were not new hands because of money. They were still mine. That was the relief. I had kept my name. Weeks turned into months. The pantry bought a new freezer with a little brass plaque that made me blush. The library put up a shelf with my husband's name above the large print mysteries. My roof did not leak in March. The trustees sent me statements in fonts I could read. One afternoon, I found Daniel on my porch fixing the screen someone had torn months ago. He worked with quiet attention the way he used to when he built model planes as a boy and the glue made his fingers shiny. He looked up when I stepped outside. "Do you need the staple gun?" I asked. "I think I've got it," he said, and he did. We sat on the steps together after he finished. The street was warm, with the sound of a lawnmower somewhere and a dog scolding a squirrel. He cleared his throat. "Mom," he said, "I didn't take your key that night because I thought you'd lose it. I took it because I thought I would. I thought I would lose this." He gestured, the slow arc of a man who could not name what he meant. "You didn't lose me," I said. "You almost lost access." He nodded. "I know." "Do you know what kept you from losing it?" I asked. "The trust," he said. "No," I said gently. "Your mother." He swallowed. The sound was loud in the quiet. "I know," he said again. That night, when I turned out the lights and the house settled around me, I walked to the bookshelf and pressed the tiny camera. The red light blinked, then went dark. I removed the card one last time and slid it into the folder Ms. Alvarez kept for me with my letters and affidavits and statements tucked like quilts. The law had been my hammer. Love had been the nail. Together, they had held. There is a satisfaction in being underestimated. It's a quiet thing, like the click of a lock engaging or the breath you take before you tell your own story with your own mouth. If there is revenge in what I did, it is not in the check we sent or the petition we defeated. It is in the way I refused to be moved off my name, in the way I made my son look at the woman who raised him and choose to stand beside her instead of over her. The money will pay for roofs and freezers and mysteries about clever women solving crimes no one else noticed. The real prize is something younger people don't put in their spreadsheets. The knowledge that when it mattered, I kept the keys. If you want to know how a grandmother turned a windfall into a reckoning without leaving a ruin behind, you have to remember the kitchen. You have to remember the whistle of the kettle, the neat corners of a dangerous paper, and the sympathy of a bank clerk who had seen everything and still believed. You have to remember how he said the easy way and how I chose the right one. The rest, the camera's red light, the doctor's letter, the courtroom's air, those are only the tools. The story is what I did with them.
My grandma told me this story. I have many more stories. Subscribe so you don't miss the most interesting things.